Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Welcome to the Business Innovators Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Brown. My guest today is Tim Ringgold, a board-certified music therapist in Orange County, California, and director of Sonic Divinity, LLC. He's been in that role for more than 10 years, providing music therapy to thousands of teens and adults in residential treatment, and is a sought-after speaker, having shared the stage with some of the top minds on the subject of music and the brain. In fact, in 2012, Tim was the first person ever to give a TED Talk on music therapy. Tim is also a former regional president of the American Music Therapy Association, and he personally walked into his first 12-step room on Tuesday, February 17th, 2003. So he knows firsthand what it's like to work and play a program of recovery. Tim is about to release his first book on the subject of music therapy, titled Sonic Recovery: Harness the Power of Music to Stay Sober. And he joins us today to talk about it. Tim, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Before we get into talking about the book, tell us a little bit about your backstory. How did you get into music, and how did that get you to where you are today?
Sure. I started like most elementary school kids back in the 20th century when we all still had music. I was on stage when I was 4. First solo was I Want a Harmonica for Hanukkah. And I was in kindergarten, and that drove my Catholic mom crazy.
You still remember the song?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How's it go?
I could buy a saxophone, but that's not right for me. I could get a trumpet, but I'd much rather be.
Awesome.
Swear to goodness, that was my part in the song. And my mom was the director of religious education at the little country Catholic church in our hometown. And so the fact that I was singing about getting a harmonica for Hanukkah had everybody on the floor.
That's great.
So, that was where it started. And, like most people, at first I was just introduced to it in school, and then I found I loved it, and I started taking piano lessons, and then I got scared of all those scary kind of old school piano teachers. Got into high school, taught myself guitar, found Pink Floyd, taught myself Wish You Were Here on one string on my dad's classical guitar when I was 15, and found Led Zeppelin. And, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, and The Who got me through high school.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have done without them. I was an East Coast kid who went to a private school and was kind of trained that you become a businessman, you don't become a musician. And I was struggling because I was an athlete and I was an artist. And I didn't think of myself as a businessman at all. And I kind of came out to my family at 22. I was like, I've got something to tell you. I'm a musician. And they were devastated, right? Oh, must have been the drugs. What did we do wrong? Right? They were devastated because I went to a prep school from Connecticut. You're bred, you're not raised. And I was not a doctor, not a lawyer, not an MBA, a musician. What happened? But I found for myself, athletes and artists, they think, train, and perform in a very similar way, where they study, build, train, practice, peak, perform, recover, study, train, build, perform, and they have a very different rhythm than this kind of 9 to 5, 50 week a year output.
Yeah.
And I got diagnosed with ADD, and I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and people thought there was something wrong with me. I thought there was something wrong with me. I just was an athlete, an artist, and some might even say entrepreneur is the entrepreneur fits that same model. But I didn't know how to plug in to make a living as a grown-up doing that, right? I just, no clue. So I thought, teaching music, that's not my style. Opera, not my style. Musical theater, not my style. I didn't really know what to do. And I had a career-ending knee injury, so sports was out. And I just thought, what do I do? But then I went through a traumatic experience when I was 22, and my 5 best friends were murdered. And I came from a small town, and that was, the worst thing ever. And I went to 5 funerals in 4 days, and I sang at 4 of those funerals a song I had written for my friends that I used to play to them at the saloon in our town. And people were just like, that was the most healing thing. This is a ministry you have. But it tore me up to do it. It was really rough. And the last night I went and I saw Steve Morse play live, and I had never seen him play live. And he's this, amazing guitarist from the Dixie Dregs, now plays with Deep Purple. And for 2 hours, I was totally at peace. I forgot all about the trauma. And at the end of the concert, it dawned on me, like, I feel good. How is this possible? And I finally understood what everyone had been telling me all week when they were listening to me play at my friends' funerals. I was experiencing what they were experiencing when I listened to Steve Morse play. And the whole thing came full circle, and I got it. And I said, that's where the purpose of my life was defined. And that was to heal people with music, because music brought me out of the darkest moment of my life. And all I wanted to do after that was just be able to do the same for somebody, anybody, in any situation. And that's how it got started.
That's an incredible story. I've got a book here. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. Oliver Sacks, Musicophilia.
Yeah.
He says in there, and I still, every time I read this line, I have to really think hard about this to really understand what he's trying to say here. He says, quote, "Music uniquely among the arts is both completely abstract and profoundly emotional. It has no power to represent anything particular or external. It has no power to represent anything particular or external, but it has a unique power to express inner states or feelings." And again, I have to think about that. What does that mean to you?
Well, there's a great quote by Dave Grohl, who's now the singer of the Foo Fighters and was the drummer to Nirvana. And when the Foo Fighters played Wembley Stadium, they sold out Wembley like 5 nights in a row or something crazy, 85,000 people there every night. One of the quotes from that, he said, one of the great things about music is that you can sing a song to 85,000 people and they will sing it back for 85,000 different reasons. Because there's something about music that's uniquely subjective in that as the audience, we become the subject matter in the story somehow automatically. We hear ourselves in Adele's songs about breakup. We hear ourselves in like a rebel anthem by a band who's doing, giving the middle finger to the man. Mm-hmm. It's almost autobiographical about music for some reason, where we automatically take something from the music and it touches a very deep part of our identity, who we are and how we feel. And it's a very, very unique piece of art in the world like that.
So it really doesn't matter, you hear people ask musicians all the time, well, what did you mean by that song? Or what's the meaning of those lyrics? And you hear a lot of them say, it doesn't matter what the meaning, it doesn't matter what I think the meaning is. It matters what it means to you. And it's funny, as you're kind of talking about that, how those songs that you find, the anthems or the heartbreak songs, I don't know if we find them or they find us at the perfect time throughout our lives, right? Yes. So exactly when we're going through a breakup, boy, there's the perfect song that stays with us for the rest of our lives. I can remember Rod Stewart's Tonight's the Night. It was the song that played the first time I kissed a girl, right? So there's these songs that stick with you the rest of your life that take you back to those moments.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned Rod Stewart because I tell a similar story about my first heartbreak, who was Jenny Orgera when I was in 7th grade, and the song Some Guys Get All the Luck by Rod Stewart. I know the whole chorus by heart because I used to cry in my backyard listening to that song on my boombox. And I know every word, and it's a terrible song. But because of the emotion that I was going through, because the way our memory works is that there's an informational component and an emotional component, and the stronger the emotion attached to the information, the more the memory sticks. And because music stimulates our emotion centers, it's a really good tool for memory, which is why people can remember an uncanny amount of music lyrics, songs, and memories. When a song comes on, a whole chapter from a moment in time will open up with all of the information because the music is a memory marker and the music was linked and it's attached to that memory. So For example, I used to work with patients who had dementia. And there's one particular gentleman who I mentioned in my book, who's since passed away. He was in the Army in World War II. And he couldn't tell you where he was, what day it was. So he wasn't alert or oriented to time, day, anything, right? But if we played the Caisson song, he would start telling me detailed stories of being on R&R in the Mediterranean because he was in the Italian theater. His dad was deployed to the African theater, and the Army arranged for the two of them to meet at a neutral location to have a weekend together.
Very cool.
And that is magical, right? So we have this relationship with music where we can open up very big parts of ourselves that sometimes we forget are even there until a song comes on the radio, right? And then suddenly we're back.
And here's the thing too, we have grown up since babies, most of us, with some sort of melody, right? The nursery rhymes, same thing, the repetition of it, we've grown up with that. You know, it's kind of mind-blowing when you kind of think about how much of our lives have been spent taking that information into our brains. And so how does this then relate to music therapy? And maybe the better question is, can you define and put in a little box for us what exactly music therapy is and what it does for people?
Sure. The easiest way to do that is to use an analogy to physical therapy. So we all instinctively exercise by moving our bodies. We don't necessarily call all the movement we do exercise, but we all move our bodies. We don't have to think about moving our bodies. We just move them. And every once in a while, we can go to the gym and work out. We don't need a physical therapist to work out. But we might have an injury or a diagnosis where movement is becoming challenging. And we need to work with a physical therapist who's figured out how to use exercise and movement in a very targeted way to treat a very specific either diagnosis or injury to get us back up and on our feet. Music therapy, we use music in the same manner. So we treat very specific diagnoses, conditions with music to target changes that aren't musical at all. So for example, in the work I do in recovery with people who are struggling with substance abuse, I use the word sober, right? And sober is an acronym, right? So when we engage in music, it helps us stay present, open up, be creative, escape in a healthy way, and reconnect. And those are the clinical goals that are being addressed inside of a music therapy session. We might be engaging in all different kinds or types or ways with music, and I'll get into that shortly. But the most important thing is that we're addressing some sort of diagnosis, some sort of struggle. And just like a physical therapist points exercise in a targeted way, a music therapist points music in a targeted way. And you don't need a physical therapist to exercise, and you don't need a music therapist to enjoy music. But in certain circumstances, each one of those allied health professionals is just the right person at just the right time to help you get to where you're trying to go clinically.
So here's a silly question. With music therapy, is there a specific kind of music, a specific genre that you have to use?
It's a great question because music is an ocean or a universe, right? It's so broad. And the human lifespan is also so broad, right? So music gets used in different ways at different times of the lifespan for different purposes. So the nice thing about music is it's extremely malleable and broad. So there's lots of ways we can take it, point it, engage with it, depending on the person, depending on their struggle. One of the phrases that drove me nuts in school, because as a former athlete, I come from a physical therapy background where things are very protocol. Mm-hmm. We'd ask questions all the time in class about, well, how do we do this? And what would be the right thing to do that? And our teacher would always say, it depends. And we'd be like, no, I want the straight answer. And there was no straight answer because music is still an art form. So it's very subjective. So music preference matters. So for example, if I want to get you moving, like walking, right? You've had a stroke, trying to get you up and walking again. And we want to use music with a beat, right? And you hate country. I mean, you hate it. right? And I pick a good 4 on the floor, honky tonk country song to get you moving, you are going to get pissed off and you are going to not be happy and you are not going to respond well to that therapy. But if you're a rocker from the 70s and I put on some old AC/DC with a nice, classic boom, cha, boom, cha, boom, cha, boom, cha, you are humming down that hallway. And in fact, patients who are recovering from stroke will get their stride back in about 55% of the time if they combine music therapy with physical therapy, because it lights the brain up, it excites the person, there's a pleasure response in the brain to their preferred style of music, and they'll engage in the therapy much longer. That's why most of us work out to music, because what's happening between the ears physiologically, when you're listening to your favorite music, the same part of your brain that when you eat chocolate or have sex sends off a reward response. It's called the nucleus accumbens, and it sends off this reward. And when you have chocolate or have sex or enjoy the music that you prefer, the brain releases the same pleasure response. So we get high on our own supply. And that's why we'll work out longer to music. And that's that whole thing about your happy endorphins. When you're listening to the music you enjoy, you don't notice the perception of effort or discomfort at the same time.
Interesting. And so again, as you're telling that, it makes me think of another instance where music plays a big role in something we don't even think about it. I spent 20 years in the U.S. Army. I was a drill sergeant. I taught young soldiers how to march. What are we doing when we march? We're calling cadence, singing cadence to help them keep the beat. And there comes a point when you don't really need to continue calling cadence when you've got the rhythm and the soldiers know what they're doing, but it becomes more of something that they want to do because you're kind of singing this kind of crude and kind of fun and funny cadence as they're going down the street, and it just helps to pass the time and it gives them something to do. So again, just another instance that pops into my head of how music helps through something I've never thought of before.
Yeah, that's one of the examples I give, because when you are engaging in music making, you can't perceive a pain signal at the same level at the same time. The attention center of your brain is a single operating computer. Like it can only, and it moves from one thing to the next thing, but it only holds, the attention center of your brain only holds one object at a time in it. So you have this little filter, old part of your brain, this little filter called the reticular activating system. And it's the same system that when you are sad, you suddenly hear those sad songs. Or when you buy a red Tesla, or you like a red Tesla and now you see them everywhere, it's that same attention filter that blocks out most of the things that are coming and going past us and only lets in the things that are relevant. That system, when you're singing or engaging in music, will block that pain or discomfort signal from the attention center of your brain while you are on music.
Interesting. So you address all of this in your book, yes?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about that. Again, the name of the book is Sonic Recovery, Harness the Power of Music to Stay Sober. Why that title?
Well, for me, let's just break it down. So Sonic Recovery, trying to create some sort of landscape that's immediately different for people in the recovery world. And it's goal-oriented, right? Like we're moving towards something, right? My company is Sonic Divinity, which for me early on, I always felt like music is the sound of God and I'm just an instrument kind of using this tool to help people, right? So now we're applying it very specifically in a treatment context for recovery. We all know music's powerful. We all have a very personal, powerful relationship with music anyway. So I'm not introducing anybody to music. That's the best part, right? It's already a close friend of theirs. What I'm really doing is I'm showing them how to utilize that close friend, that old friend of theirs, in a way that talk therapy can't do when it comes to recovery. Music therapy is very powerful because music engages parts of the brain that just simple talk therapy does not. So you're harnessing this power of this tool that's been around forever, that you've enjoyed, I've enjoyed, we've all enjoyed, to stay sober, stay present, open up, be creative, escape in a healthy way, and reconnect.
Interesting. How long has music therapy been a thing?
So the music therapy in its current form as an allied health profession, schools in the United States started granting degrees in music therapy after World War II. You could get a bachelor's in music therapy, and then you could go on and get a master's in music therapy or a PhD in music therapy. There's about 80 schools in the United States that offer a music therapy program. After you complete your academic part, you complete a 1,200-hour clinical internship. Then you sit for a national board certification exam. Once you're board certified, you have to do 100 CEUs, continuing ed credits, every 5 years to maintain your board certification status. So it's very much like any other therapist that goes through a similar educational track. There's only about 8,000 music therapists in the United States, so it's a tiny, tiny little niche. Most people haven't heard of it because there's simply so few that are doing it.
Yeah. So where's it going?
That's a good question. It depends on who you ask, because some want more education, want to go like master's level entry, like physical therapy did. But the field is already very small. And if you did that, it would shrink the field even more because it makes it less available to a musician who's got a heart, who wants to help people, to tell them now you need a master's degree before you're going to get paid. It makes it a tough sell. So some of us feel like, well, we don't want to go in that direction. We're going to lose the field altogether. We need to actually go in the opposite direction, like physical therapy did, where they created a physical therapy aide and a physical therapy assistant. Occupational therapy did the same thing, occupational therapy assistant. So you could maybe get an associate's degree and then get involved, be able to utilize music as a tool, because the number of musicians out there, A, it's a talent pool that's just waiting to be tapped. B, they all have a heart. They're sensitive. They're musicians. Musicians are apparently sensitive. So, the number of them who want to do something with their craft, and they don't want to feel the pressure of American Idol and trying to make it in the music business. They just want to have a career where they can help people, they can be musical. But the idea of going off to college for 4 years plus an unpaid internship is often a deal breaker. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's so small.
Yeah. So you have to be a musician in order to be a music therapist?
Yeah. You have to audition to get in on either, a classical instrument, which again, that right there limits a lot of people who are self-taught, great musicians, but didn't have any classical training. And then you have to demonstrate proficiency in guitar, piano, and voice in order to graduate and be solid, be a good musician, because when the music's not strong, the therapy's not going to be strong. Poorly played music doesn't serve anybody. And well-played music inspires everybody. So that solid foundation of musicianship has to be there. And that is part of the challenge at the same time, to be, a professional level musician and then a professional level therapist on top of it. My degree program was so intense just to get a bachelor's. I had to study. Oh, it was over the top. So it's a tough sell to get people to go down that path. But I'll tell you, I was 32 when I went back to school for music therapy. I haven't worked a day since I graduated, because we don't work music, we play it. So I bring this distinction, and this is an important piece of the book, which separates music therapy from other therapies in recovery. Recovery is hard work. It's very heavy and it's very intense. And that's why it's just easy not to recover. But music is playful and it's light and it's fun, dare I say. All kinds of things happen in the body and in the brain when we play versus when we work. It's very healthy for us to play. So we're bringing a tool into the recovery world that's, it's a lot more fun to engage in than some of the other tools of recovery.
And do you still play just recreationally these days?
That's a great question. It's actually a challenge for a lot of music therapists, is to still use the tool we work with every day and then go play after hours. So for myself, I had to create, and this is part of the book, a 40 days of play challenge for myself and others to literally get myself to just play again, because I was, thinking about it very seriously at work while I was on the clock, and I have these great instruments at home. And so now in the evenings, I'll sneak away, and the goal is to play for 10 minutes a day. If you can play for 10 minutes a day, it has a positive benefit on you. And that's not a big ask. It's not a big chunk of time.
So I've seen a picture of you. I don't know how current it is, back in the day, looking like you stepped right out of a Red Hot Chili Peppers video. What was going on there?
When I was a mock star, which is a rock star who hasn't made it yet, I was in a
Aren't we all?
Yeah, I was in a very intense heavy metal, industrial, hardcore, whatever phrase you want to use, band. And I had the bright idea that my look was going to be, I was going to paint myself in liquid latex before every show, and that I would paint myself in a different look for every show, so that every show was a moment in time, like a collector's item. Like if you missed that show, you missed it. You couldn't just catch the next show. And each member of our band did that visually. So that picture you saw, I like staring that, because when people hear therapist, they kind of think a little L7, a little square. And, if my Instagram picture is me holding a couple of Dimebag Darrell, guitars. And, I was a rocker, and I was a metalhead, and I was, in the pit and stage diving and an intense guy. And through all of that, even with listening to the most intense music, that was still my closest friend in my darkest times.
Why now this time for your book?
Well, there has never been a more needed time. This is the like heavy side of the conversation, because, music therapy works in a lot of different settings, but how do I just try to say this without it even sounding like hyperbole? The statistics on overdose right now in the United States are so over the top. We don't have a frame of reference. 192 sets of parents got the phone call today that their kid overdosed and died. 192 sets of parents, right? Today. Tomorrow, 192 more parents in the United States are going to get the phone call. One more day, close to 400 Americans are going to die from overdose in 2 days. So the numbers are so over the top right now, and they're so diffuse, because it's not like, I hate to use this as a comparison, but when we have what we have a lot of in our country are mass shootings. They're in one place, the trauma is one place, and it makes the news. People are overdosing in this house, and in this neighborhood, and in that little town, and in that forgotten county. And it's spread out and diffuse, and there's so much shame around it that it's not making the front page news the way it should. When I was first researching the book, and I was looking at, I was losing guys from heroin. That was and this is a couple of years back, and one of my guys OD'd, died of heroin overdose, and I was looking up the numbers. And in the first 9 years of me in clinical practice as a music therapist, we lost like 84,000 Americans just to heroin overdose, compared to 59,000 Americans in the Vietnam War in like an 11 or longer year period.
Yeah.
And it gets into some really, philosophical debates about addiction, about substance abuse in our culture. Where does it come from? What does it mean? And the bottom line is that people who are not in pain don't become addicted. They use and they stop. The typical recreational drug and alcohol user in the United States uses drugs and alcohol recreationally for about a 10-year period in their life, and then they stop of their own volition. They just put it down. Lifestyle changes, friends change, they get married, they have kids, they settle down, whatever. People who are in pain use all kinds of substances and behaviors to try to medicate that pain, whether it's physical pain, emotional pain, social pain, or spiritual pain. And
it's not always drugs or alcohol either, right?
Nope. No, sir. It can be gambling. It can be sex. I mean, the pornography problem that we have right now is a huge epidemic because it's free. It's easily accessible. If you have a phone now with high-speed connection, you have access. Gaming addiction is a huge problem right now. And sadly, there are companies who are spending a lot of time and money figuring out how to get people addicted to substances and behaviors, and they're monetizing that, and they're becoming very successful. Just the number of people who are in pain in our culture right now is catastrophic because the numbers show it, right? So 192 a day, God, we got to do something, right? And talk therapy only gets you so far because one of the chief causes of addiction is trauma. And trauma needs to be expressed in some sort of physical, nonverbal way. Talking about trauma doesn't heal trauma. I bring drums and percussion to my groups every other week, and we bang it out and we play it out and we beat it out. And that's the thing about opening up, expressing this emotion, this energy and motion that's trapped inside of us that we don't have words for and we're too afraid or ashamed to talk about. We get that out non-verbally in a way that talk therapy can't do. The good news is that at this time in the addiction treatment world, they're starting to realize there's a limit to cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a limit to medicated assisted therapy. We need more experiential therapies, nonverbal therapies. So you're seeing more things like EMDR, dance and movement therapy, music therapy, art therapy, equine therapy become parts of the treatment team at treatment centers all around. And there's really no direct-to-consumer book that teaches the average person how to utilize music exactly this way that I know of. So I did have to deal with a little imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not an old white-haired guy with a PhD who's been working for 30 years in a research lab. Like, I struggle with, like, who am I to write a book about this? But after being in the clinics for 10 years and treating thousands of people and realizing how bad the problem is, well, man, I only see, 3 to 6 people in a treatment center at a time. We've got to scale this. If I can teach them how to fish and how to use music for self-care to help stay sober, so much the better.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all this. It's an important topic. And as you said, it gets kind of shamed. And so I'm glad to hear you talk about this, and even happier to hear you putting out a book to help people through this. When can we expect to see the book?
June 10th.
June 10th. Okay.
June 10th.
Let's shift gears a little bit here before we wrap up. Familiar with Marcel Proust, the Proust questionnaire?
No.
Okay. Marcel Proust was a French writer back in the early 1900s who believed that in answering some of these questions I'm about to ask you here, that an individual reveals his or her true nature. All right. So you up for this?
Yeah, this is fun. I don't know anything about it. So
pretty harmless questions, really. And the only rule is you just got to answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay.
All right.
Number 1, what is your idea of perfect happiness?
Oh, I'm not a big fan of the word perfect, but I will tell you, looking into my wife or my son or my daughter's eyes and seeing happiness in their eyes kind of ticks a box that nothing else does for me.
Beautiful. What is your greatest fear?
My greatest fear is that all of the messed up things that I've done and continue to do will one day come out in an expose, and that, they'll shoot the messenger and the message will get lost.
All right. What is your greatest extravagance?
Oh gosh, I'm horribly boring in that way. I would say that it used to be that I like to put liquid latex on my body before I go on stage and play guitar.
How long did it take you to clean up after one of those shows?
Oh, it's the greatest, man. I would break a sweat and it would start to molt and split, and it would fall off during the shows, and then I would lean over the crowd at the end of the shows and they would peel it off.
Oh my God, that's awesome. All right. Which words or phrases do you most overuse?
Literally. I don't know what to tell you. It's the one my kids hear all the time. Those would probably be the two that I'm the biggest offender. And I'm happy to say, as a recovering perfectionist, I don't know. I say that a lot now, and that's like progress for me.
And that's good. That's okay, right? That's okay.
Exactly. That's like, I'm going for saying I don't know too much after back in the day where I was Mr. Well, let me tell you, let me make something up right now because I don't know the answer, but I want to sound like I do.
So you're a musician. You're a talented human being. No doubt about that. But which talent would you most like to have that you don't have?
Oh, gosh. I'd like to be able to free dive to like 30 feet in the
underwater.
Ocean.
Yeah.
That's like, I saw somebody last week free diving at 30 feet while I was in Hawaii, and I was like, that right there, that he looks like an alien down there, or she, I couldn't even tell.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy stuff, man.
Yeah, that's me. I'm crazy. So I would really like to free dive.
All right. So we'll keep with the theme of you being a musician. I don't think Proust actually ever asked this question, but who's your favorite band?
Gosh, probably either Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd are on the in the pantheon up at the top, and then there's a band called Dream Theater, which is this progressive metal band that are arguably the greatest, most talented group of musicians I've ever heard. And then Steve Vai, the guitarist, one of the most inspirational musicians I've ever listened to.
Okay, I'll just chime in, say Led Zeppelin, greatest rock and roll band on the face of the planet. I've been telling my kids that since they were little. Who's your favorite superhero?
Thor.
Any particular reason?
Yeah, because Thor didn't know how powerful he was. He thought he was the god of hammers till his hammer broke. And that's when he realized where his true strength came from, which was inside. And I feel like that's like a really empowering metaphor, that it's not my guitar. It's not, any object or device or tool or thing that I own that makes me who I am. It's who I develop myself on the inside to be. That's
deep. Nice. Very nice. Tim, thanks for playing the game. You did great. I think you revealed you're a great human being. That's an unofficial score right there, but I think we're going to be all right with it. Hey, how can our listeners learn more about you, about Sonic Divinity, and how you can help them with music therapy?
Yeah. So if you're interested in anything about the book, just go to sonicrecovery.com. And at sonicrecovery.com, I'm going to give you some relaxation scripts, some relaxation music, and a guide to relaxation apps that you can download, virtual instruments, how to use music as a tool. All of that's free if you go to sonicrecovery.com. And then that will also keep you in the loop for when the book is released, because you'll get some hidden bonuses when the book comes out as well.
Awesome. Sonic Recovery, Harness the Power of Music to Stay Sober. That's being released when again?
June 10th.
June 10th. So head on over to the website, check that out. Tim, this has been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you sharing some time with us to get us all smart on music therapy and how that can help folks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and letting me share, my passion and my expertise.
You bet. We'll have to do this again and really get into some rock and roll talk here.
Yes.
All right.
Let's do it.
All right, that's it for this episode of the Business Innovators Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Brown. Until next time, keep innovating.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.